Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The rain had been falling since dawn, soft and steady, like the whisper of old ghosts upon the river. Sir Duncan the Tall rode through it with his head bowed and his cloak drawn tight, though the water still found its way down his neck and into his boots. Beside him trudged Egg, his squire, small and silent under a hood too large for him. The boy's ears, shaved bare to hide the silver hair beneath, were red with cold. They had come down from the hills of the Trident, following a winding track through reeds and mist toward a place called Shallow's Ford. It was not on any map Dunk had ever seen, but the folk in Maidenpool had spoken of it, a fishing village along the river, where a knight might find a meal and perhaps a purse of coin guarding the ferry crossings. It was honest work, and Dunk was tired of fighting for lords who barely remembered his name. The world was quiet, save for the rain and the squelch of hooves in mud. Egg broke the silence first. "Sir? Aye, lad? Do you think it's true? What the innkeep said, about a dragon in the marshes?" Dunk snorted. "If there's a dragon there, I'll eat my own boot. The last of them died before either of us was born. Folk see fire and start telling tales. Might be bandits or smugglers, or just some fool with a torch." Egg frowned, the way he did when trying to measure courage against sense. But the boats burned, and they said a knight went missing. "Knights go missing all the time," Dunk said, though his hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. "Sometimes they find trouble. Sometimes trouble finds them." The track sloped downward, and before long the gray outline of the village appeared, a scatter of low huts with thatched roofs huddled close to the river's bend. Smoke curled thinly from a few chimneys, but many stood cold. The air smelled of fish and wet earth. A weather-beaten sign marked Shallow's Ford, the paint long since washed away. A man waited by the ferry pier, wrapped in a patched cloak and holding a spear taller than himself. He straightened as Dunk approached. "Traveler," he called out, "you'd best turn back. There's no welcome here for strangers." "We seek only a dry fire and something warm to eat," Dunk said, dismounting. The man's eyes flicked to the sigil burned faintly into Dunk's shield. A tree on a field of sunset orange, though faded and scarred from many blows. It was not a famous sigil, but it carried the weight of knighthood. "Another knight came last week," the ferryman muttered. "Said much the same. He went to the marshes to look for the dragon. Never came back." "Tell me what you've seen," Dunk said. The man hesitated, then spat into the mud. 3 nights passed, a fire rose in the reeds. Green fire it was, bright as day, and hotter than the 7 hells. Burned half our fishing nets and boiled the shallows. Since then, no one dares go near. The old ones say it's a dragon returned from the deep. Dunk felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. "Green fire," he repeated softly. He had seen wildfire once before, on the Blackwater, when he was just a hedge knight among thousands. It burned hotter than any flame, clinging to skin and steel alike. "And you say this started 3 nights past?" The man nodded. "Aye, the same night Sir Harwin Frey went missing. His horse came back alone, with the saddle burned through." Egg shifted uncomfortably. "Could it be Targaryen fire?" he asked under his breath. Dunk shot him a look that warned him to hold his tongue. The boy's words could start rumors faster than sparks on dry wood. "Where's your elder?" Dunk asked the ferryman. I'd speak to him, or her. That'd be Mistress Marna, the man said, pointing toward the largest hut near the center of the village. But she won't tell you aught you don't already know. We've sent word upriver to the Frys at the crossing, but they've troubles of their own. None have come. Dunk thanked him and led his horse toward the hut. The villagers watched from doorways, pale, hollow faces peering through rain. When he knocked, an old woman answered, her gray hair braided down her back and her eyes sharp as flint. "You're the knight they sent?" she asked. "No one sent me," Dunk replied. "I'm Sir Duncan the Tall. My squire and I were passing through." Her gaze lingered on Egg. "That one's too young for such roads." "He's quick enough, and he learns fast," Dunk said. "Tell me about your dragon." Marna sighed. "Would that I could. I've lived here 60 years, sir. Never seen a dragon, nor wished to. But the fires are real. The marshes are cursed now. Beasts fled, fish dead, and men gone missing. Sir Harwin was brave enough to go looking. All we found was his helm, half melted, and the smell of pitch. Could be wildfire," Dunk said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "Aye, that's what I fear. There was a man here, a stranger with a wagon, came through a fortnight past, claimed he was selling spices, left before dawn without paying his keep. Next day, the fires began." Dunk's jaw tightened. If he's carrying wildfire, he's a fool or a traitor. Or both, Egg muttered. Outside, the rain slackened and thunder rolled low across the river. Marna's gaze turned toward the window. "We've lived through wars and rebels, sir, but this feels like something older. Something waking." Dunk said nothing. He looked out into the mist where the reeds swayed like ghosts and the water glimmered faintly green beneath the storm. That night, when they lay by the hearth in Marna's hut, Egg whispered, "If it is wildfire, sir, what if someone means to use it again?" Dunk stared into the dying fire. "Then we'll find them before they do," he said. But as the wind howled over the marshes, carrying the faint scent of brimstone, even Sir Duncan the Tall felt a shiver crawl up his spine. For somewhere beyond the reeds, in the black heart of the shallows, a light flickered, not yellow or red, but green, and something moved beneath it, slow and sinuous as a sleeping beast. Morning came pale and heavy with fog. The river was still, its surface like dull glass, broken only by the croak of distant frogs and the whisper of something unseen beneath the reeds. Dunk rose early, shaking off sleep and damp straw, while Egg sat by the embers of last night's fire, poking at them with a stick. "We'll have a look at those marshes," Dunk said, fastening his sword belt. "If there's wildfire loose, we can't leave it for the wind to carry." Egg looked up. "And if it's not wildfire? Then we'll see what it is. Knights are meant to stand where others fear to go." They left the village as the mist thinned to drifting veils. The path wound between low banks and pools where the river spilled its shallows. Dead fish floated near the reeds, and the air smelled faintly of rot and something sharper, a chemical tang that stung the nose. Dunk knew it well. Wildfire. Gods help them. They came upon the ruins of a burned boat, blackened timbers jutting from the mud like ribs. Dunk crouched beside it, pressing his fingers to the charred wood. It crumbled under his touch, but there, on the grain's edge, a faint green shimmer glowed in the light. "Seven save us," he murmured. Whoever did this, they knew what they carried. "Could it be smugglers?" Egg asked. "Smugglers don't burn their own ships," Dunk said. "And wildfire's not something common men can buy. It's made in King's Landing by the alchemists and guarded tighter than the Iron Bank's gold." Egg frowned. Then how did it get here? That's what we'll find out. They followed the river deeper into the marshlands. The ground grew soft, sucking at Dunk's boots. Frogs leapt from his path. Birds burst from the rushes, startled by the heavy steps of man and horse. All the while, Dunk kept his hand on his sword hilt, listening to the stillness between the sounds. By midday, they reached the remains of a camp, a small fire pit, a half-torn tent, and a wagon's shattered axle sunk in the mud. Crates lay scattered, some split open. Within, beneath wet canvas, Dunk found rows of glass jars wrapped in straw, their contents glimmering faintly green even in shadow. "Don't touch them," Dunk warned sharply as Egg reached forward. "One spark, and the 7 kingdoms will have one less prince and one less fool of a knight." Egg froze, his eyes wide. "So it is wildfire." "Aye," Dunk said grimly. "Enough of it to burn the whole village and the river besides. Whoever brought it here didn't mean to light fishing boats. They meant to send a message." He studied the crates more closely. Each bore a faded sigil, a black dragon across a red field. Dunk's stomach turned cold. "The black fires," he muttered. Egg's mouth fell open. "But they're gone, sir. Broken and scattered after the last rebellion." "Scattered, not gone," Dunk said. "There's always some fool clinging to the dream of their king. Maybe this was their work, a spark meant to reignite old fires." He straightened, scanning the reeds. If this much wildfire was moved here, someone powerful must have arranged it, and they'll not take kindly to us finding it. As if to answer him, a faint splash echoed from the water's edge. Dunk turned sharply. Through the fog, he saw movement, a figure slipping away into the rushes. "Stop!" he shouted, drawing his sword. The figure ran. Dunk plunged after, crashing through knee-high water. Egg stumbled behind him, calling his name. The chase led across a stretch of sucking mud and over a low ridge where the river bent sharply. Dunk was faster, his long strides eating the ground, until he reached a clearing ringed by cattails. The figure turned suddenly. A man cloaked in oilskin, face hidden by a hood. In his hand gleamed a small vial, glowing faintly green. "Put that down," Dunk ordered. The man laughed, a dry, cracked sound. "You shouldn't have come here, Sir Duncan. The fire was meant to cleanse, not to be stopped." "Cleanse?" Dunk growled. "You'd burn peasants to ash for what cause?" "For the true dragon," the man hissed. "For the blood that was betrayed." He lifted the vial higher, its glow brightening. Dunk lunged forward, knocking the man's arm aside just as the vial slipped from his grasp. It shattered against a stone, and green fire erupted, searing through the mist. Dunk threw himself backward, dragging Egg with him. The flames hissed and spat, clinging to water as though the river itself were oil. The stranger screamed as his cloak caught fire, stumbling into the blaze. Dunk tried to reach him, but it was useless. The man was already gone, his body consumed in seconds. When at last the fire sputtered and sank, only blackened reeds and steaming mud remained. Egg was pale, shaking. Was he one of them? A black fire? "Perhaps," Dunk said, wiping soot from his face. "Or a fool used by one. But if he knew my name, then someone's been watching us." They returned to the village by dusk, weary and silent. The ferryman met them at the pier, eyes wide with hope. "Did you see it, sir? Did you see the dragon?" Dunk shook his head. "No dragon. Only men pretending to be one." Marna met them at her door, listening as Dunk told her what they'd found: the wildfire, the crates, the dead man. Her expression darkened. "There'll be more of them," she said quietly. "If this was a spark, Others will come to fan the flames. Then we'll be ready, Dunk said. That night, the villagers gathered around the hearth in silence. Egg sat beside Dunk, staring into the flames. Do you think this will reach King's Landing? Maybe, Dunk said, but it won't start there. Trouble always begins in places no one remembers. Outside, the fog thickened again, swallowing the world beyond the door, and somewhere far down the river, unseen in the dark, a lantern flickered, another wagon, another fire, and the whisper of wings in dreams. Egg did not sleep at all that night, and Dunk, though his eyes closed, dreamed of green fire licking across the water, of dragons long dead rising from the shallows, and of a crown of flame resting upon the head of a boy with silver hair. The days that followed brought no peace to Shallows Ford. The fog thickened, clinging to the marshes like a shroud. No wind stirred it, no sun pierced it. It simply sat upon the land, cold and heavy, swallowing sound and sight alike. The villagers spoke in hushed voices, lighting their candles even at midday, while Dunk kept a steady watch on the riverbank. He had buried what was left of the burned man beyond the reeds, though there was little to bury. The soil there still smoked faintly, and nothing grew near it. Egg had said a prayer to the seven, his young voice trembling in the mist. But Dunk had said nothing. Some deaths were beyond words. Each morning, Dunk searched the marshes anew, hoping to find more signs, a trail, a name, something to explain why wildfire had been brought to such a place. But there was nothing. Whoever had planned the scheme had hidden their tracks well. Egg followed him faithfully, though the boy's curiosity was edged now with fear. "Sir?" he asked one afternoon as they crossed a narrow bridge of half-rotted planks. "Why would the Blackfires do this? They can't still think they'll take the throne, can they?" "Hope's a harder thing to kill than men," Dunk said. "And pride harder still. Some lords still whisper the name Demon Blackfire with more honor than their kings. If wildfire was meant for them, maybe they sought to burn the trident, send word that the dragon's still alive. But he's not," Egg said softly. "Demon's long dead." "Aye," Dunk said, glancing down at the boy, "but the dream isn't, and dreams are dangerous things." They pressed on until the ground grew firm again. The mist began to lift, revealing a rise of dry land crowned with an old watchtower, half-crumbled, overgrown with ivy, and leaning like a drunk. It must once have belonged to some petty lord before the river swallowed his lands. Dunk tied their horse at the base and climbed the broken stairs. The view from the top stretched far across the marshes, gray water, silver mist, and there, faint in the distance, a faint curl of smoke. "See that?" Dunk pointed. Egg squinted. "A campfire? Too far from the village to be one of ours." Dunk's voice hardened. "We'll pay them a visit." They set out before dusk, moving quietly along the riverbank. The closer they drew, the stronger the smell of smoke became, and something else beneath it, tar and pitch. Dunk motioned for silence. Through the reeds, they spied a small camp hidden by a rise of earth. 3 men crouched by a fire, their faces shadowed. Beside them stood 2 wagons, one laden with barrels sealed in wax. Dunk felt his pulse quicken. Wildfire again. "Stay here," he whispered to Egg, though he knew the boy wouldn't. He crept closer, sword drawn, until he could make out their words. "The ferryman said the knight's been asking questions," one man muttered. "Sir Duncan, they call him. Tall as a bloody tower. Then he'll fall hard when he finds us," another said. His accent was Dornish, slick and sharp. "The rest of the shipment comes tomorrow. Once we send it downriver, No one will stop it. Fire for the true king, they said. Fire for the black dragon reborn. Dunk rose before they could speak another word. Not if I can help it. He stepped from the reeds, sword gleaming. The men scrambled to their feet. One drew a dagger, another reached for a crossbow. Dunk struck first, his blade catching the nearest man across the shoulder. The Dornishman leapt back, shouting. Egg burst from the reeds with a cry, brandishing a stick like a spear. "Behind you, sir!" Dunk turned just as the third man loosed his bolt. It grazed his arm, biting through the mail, but he swung his sword and sent the man sprawling. The fight was short and ugly. 2 men fell. The third fled into the marshes, leaving the wagons behind. When silence fell, Dunk stood breathing hard, his sword red in the firelight. Egg's face was pale. "You shouldn't have come out," Dunk said, wiping the blade. "I couldn't just watch," Egg said stubbornly. Dunk sighed, but there was no anger left in him. "You've courage, lad, but remember, courage gets a man killed if he doesn't use it wisely." They searched the wagons. Beneath a tarp lay barrels marked with the same faded dragon seal, the Blackfire sigil. Alongside them were letters sealed in black wax. Dunk broke one open. The words were simple, but chilling. For the river lords who still remember their oaths, for those who bend knee to no bastard king, the fire will cleanse, the dragon will rise. 7 hells, Dunk muttered. There's more to this than a few fools with wildfire. Someone's stirring rebellion again. They took what they could. The letters, one small jar of wildfire sealed safe, and burned the rest. The flames roared high, and for a moment, Dunk thought he saw shapes in them. Wings, teeth, a dragon's maw opening in the night. Then it was gone. By the time they returned to Shallow's Ford, the fog had lifted. Stars glittered above, clear and cold. Marna met them at the edge of the village, her lantern trembling in her hand. "What news?" she asked. "We found the rest of the wildfire," Dunk said, "and men who meant to use it. They won't trouble you again." "Were they alone?" "No," Dunk said grimly. "Someone hires behind this. Someone with gold and cause enough to set the rivers aflame." Marna nodded slowly. "Then you must go, sir. Leave while you can. This place is too small to stand against lords' quarrels. The marsh remembers its dead, and it will take more before this ends." Dunk hesitated, looking toward the huts, the weary faces, the children who stared at him as if he were some hero from song. He wished he could tell them all was well, but he had seen enough of the world to know better. "We'll leave come dawn," he said finally. "But I'll see that King's Landing hears of this. No wildfire should ever find its way into the hands of traitors." That night, as he lay beneath a thin blanket beside the hearth, Dunk dreamed again of dragons rising from green fire, of crowns melting in their own heat, and of a boy with silver hair standing in the flames, unburned, holding a sword that burned brighter than the sun. When he woke before dawn, the dream still clung to him. Egg slept beside him, his face peaceful in the firelight, the faint glint of silver hair showing beneath the hood. Dunk watched him for a long time. Then he rose, buckled on his sword, and stepped into the misty morning. The river whispered softly below, and somewhere beyond the bend, smoke still rose from the marsh, a dark promise that this was not the end. For the dragon in the shallows had not yet finished its song. The dawn broke pale and cold over Shallow's Ford, its light painting the marshes silver and gray. The village stirred slowly, as though afraid to greet another day. Dunk saddled Thunder in silence, while Egg packed their meager supplies, a half loaf of brown bread, 2 apples, and a skin of watered wine. They had little, but they were alive, and that was more than could be said for the men who had carried wildfire into the swamps. Mist hung low over the river, veiling the far bank where reeds whispered like secrets. Dunk took one last look at the village. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, thin and uncertain, as if even fire feared to linger. Marna stood near the ferry, her gray hair unbound, the early light glinting on the wet planks beneath her feet. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. Dunk nodded. The men who brought the wildfire may not have been alone. If others come, I'd not see this place caught between them. She gave him a long look, her eyes bright and old. "You've done us a kindness, sir. Most knights would have ridden on and left us to burn. If ever you return, there'll be bread here for you and your boy." Dunk managed a faint smile. That's worth more than gold these days. As they crossed the ferry, Egg watched the river flow sluggishly beneath them. "Do you think the king will believe us?" "If he doesn't," Dunk said, "I'll find someone who will. The hand, perhaps. Wildfire isn't to be played with, not even by lords. But what if they don't care?" Dunk glanced down at him. "Then we'll make them care." They followed the river road north, where the trident's many branches wound like silver veins through the countryside. The land was quiet, save for crows circling above old battlefields, ghosts of the Blackfire Wars still clinging to the mud. Dunk remembered them too well. Banners torn and trampled, the air thick with smoke, the cries of dying men who'd once sworn brotherhood. He had fought for no banner then, only for coin and honor, and both had proved lighter than he'd hoped. By midday, they reached a crossroads where a stone inn stood, its roof patched with slate, and its sign half faded. The Green Fisher. A small crowd lingered by the stables, men in rough leathers and a few wearing faded house colors. Dunk led Thunder to water, while Egg went to fetch bread. Inside, the inn smelled of ale, mud, and old smoke. The common room was dim, but warm enough. Dunk took a seat by the hearth, stretching his long legs. The innkeep, a stout man with jowls like bread dough, poured him a cup of cider. "Travelers from the south?" he asked. "From the Riverlands," Dunk replied. "Passing through." The man nodded, leaning closer. "Then you've heard the talk. There's trouble brewing again. Word from the crossing says Lord Fry's called his banners. Says outlaws have been seen along the Trident, burning farms." Dunk stiffened. "Burning?" "Aye. Green fire, they say. Witch fire, some call it." The innkeep lowered his voice. "Folk whisper of dragons in the mists." Dunk's jaw tightened. "No dragons. Just men with more fire than sense." The innkeep shrugged, unconvinced. "Maybe so, but men burn just the same." Egg returned then with a small loaf and a wedge of cheese. He looked uneasy, glancing at the men gathered near the back of the room. They were hard-faced, armed, and watching Dunk more closely than was polite. "Sir," he murmured, "those men, they're wearing the same badge as the ones we fought in the marshes." Dunk followed his gaze. On one man's sleeve gleamed a black dragon, crudely stitched upon red cloth. He rose slowly. "Stay close, Egg." The largest of the men stood, blocking their way. His beard was thick and black, his smile thin. "Sir Duncan the Tall," he said. "We've been looking for you." "I don't know you," Dunk said, "and I've no wish to." "Ah, but you've meddled in our affairs, sir. Burned our cargo, killed our brothers. That's not easily forgiven." The man's hand drifted toward his sword. "Our master wants his goods returned." "I burned them," Dunk said flatly. "And if your master wants more fire, I'll give him all he can stomach." The man laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "You'll regret that." He lunged forward. Dunk met him with a swift blow that sent the man sprawling into the hearth, sparks flying. Chaos erupted, swords drawn, shouts rising. Egg ducked beneath a table as Dunk's blade sang through the air. One man fell, another fled for the door. The innkeep shouted, but no one listened. Within moments, it was over. The floor was slick with ale and blood. Dunk stood breathing hard, the weight of his sword heavy in his hand. He looked down at the black dragon badge torn from a corpse's sleeve. "There's no end to them," he muttered. Egg crawled from under the table, eyes wide. "They said a master," he whispered. "Who do you think it is?" Dunk sheathed his sword. "Someone with gold enough to buy wildfire, men enough to move it, and madness enough to use it. That's no common outlaw." They left the inn before dusk, riding hard along the road to the crossing. Dunk meant to warn the Freys, a proud, quarrelsome lot, but lords still sworn to the Iron Throne. If wildfire was being moved through their lands, they would want to know. The road wound through low fields, the sky bruised with gathering clouds. Rain came with nightfall, sharp and cold. By the time they reached the first of the Frey watchtowers, both were soaked to the bone. A guard hailed them from the wall, torchlight glimmering off the wet stone. "Who goes there?" "Sir Duncan the Tall," Dunk called back, with word for Lord Frey. There was a pause, then the gate creaked open. Inside, the courtyard was muddy and half-empty. Dunk dismounted, his boots sinking into the muck. A young sergeant met him, eyes wary. "Lord Frey's not receiving guests at this hour." "Tell him it concerns wildfire and blackfires," Dunk said sharply. The man blanched and hurried off. Moments later, Dunk and Egg were led into the tower's hall, a long, drafty chamber lined with torches. At its far end sat an aging man in fine furs, his pale eyes sharp despite the years. "Sir Duncan," he said, his voice thin as parchment, "I've heard of you, the hedge knight who carries trouble in his shadow." Dunk bowed stiffly. "My lord, there's wildfire being smuggled through your lands. I've seen it with my own eyes, barrels marked with the Blackfire sigil. If it reaches the Trident, you'll have more than bandits to worry about." Lord Frey's fingers drummed the arm of his chair. "Wildfire, you say? That's a matter for the king's men, not for me." "With respect, my lord," Dunk said, "if it's here already, the king's men are too late." The old lord's gaze lingered on him. "You speak boldly for a hedge knight." "I speak truly," Dunk replied. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then Lord Frey sighed. "Very well. You'll have food, dry clothes, and a bed for the night. Tomorrow, we'll see what's to be done." It was little comfort, but Dunk took it. He and Egg were shown to a narrow chamber near the gatehouse. As they settled in, Egg turned to him. "Do you trust him, sir?" Dunk shook his head. "I trust no lord who counts his gold faster than his oaths, but for now, we've nowhere else to go." Outside, thunder rumbled over the Trident. The storm broke full and wild, wind rattling the shutters. Dunk lay awake long after Egg had drifted to sleep, listening to the rain and wondering how deep this fire ran, and whose hand had kindled it. Far below, unseen in the courtyard, a cloaked figure moved through the shadows, slipping from the stables toward the river gate. In his arms, he carried a small, sealed jar that glowed faintly green in the storm-dark night. The storm raged through the night, shaking the old stones of the Frey watchtower and filling the air with the scent of wet earth and lightning. Dunk woke before dawn to the sound of hoofbeats echoing across the yard. When he looked from the narrow window slit, he saw lanterns moving swiftly toward the river gate. Shadows slipped between them, riders leaving in haste. He felt a prickle of unease. No one rode out in such weather unless fear or purpose drove them. Egg stirred on his palate. "Sir?" he murmured sleepily. "Stay here," Dunk said. He buckled on his sword and stepped into the corridor. The torches burned low, their light wavering along damp stone. Somewhere below, a door slammed. He followed the sound down the stairs to the gatehouse, where a guard half-dozed by the door. "Who left just now?" Dunk asked. The man blinked, startled. "Riders, sir. Lord Frye's orders. Said they were carrying messages upriver." "In this storm?" Dunk's voice was sharp. The guard hesitated. "Aye. One of them bore a sealed chest. Small thing, heavy. Had the Lord's mark." "A chest?" Dunk's stomach tightened. "Where were they bound?" "Didn't say, sir." Dunk turned and strode back upstairs, his boots splashing through puddles left by the leaky roof. Egg was waiting by the door, cloak half fastened. "I heard shouting," he said. "We're leaving," Dunk told him. "Now." They were saddled and ready within moments. The guards at the gate hesitated, but Dunk's glare and the weight of his sword were persuasion enough. Once beyond the walls, they followed the muddy tracks of the riders along the river road. The rain eased as the morning broke, leaving the land shrouded in low mist. The hoof prints led north, toward the deeper forks of the Trident. Dunk kept his eyes fixed ahead, every sense alert. Egg rode close beside him. "You think they've got wildfire?" "A chest small and heavy enough to carry," Dunk said grimly. "Aye, it's wildfire. I'd stake my life on it." The road wound through a stretch of wooded ground, where willows leaned over the riverbank, and the air smelled of wet moss. Birds scattered as they passed, startled from the branches. The trail was easy to follow. The riders had been in haste, careless. By midday, they reached a ruined mill house by the bend of the river. Smoke drifted from its chimney. Dunk dismounted silently and crept closer, sword drawn. Through a crack in the wall, he saw 3 riders within, drying their cloaks by the fire. Beside them, on a table, rested the chest, black, iron-banded, sealed with wax. "Stay here," Dunk whispered to Egg. "If anything happens, take the horses and ride back to the crossing." The boy's jaw tightened. "You'll need me." "I'll need you alive," Dunk said, and slipped inside. The door creaked, and all 3 men turned. One reached for his sword, but Dunk was already upon him. The fight was quick, 3 against 1, but none half so large as the hedge knight. Dunk's blade caught the first man in the leg. He went down screaming. The second lunged. Dunk parried, drove his shoulder into the man's chest, and sent him sprawling into the fire. The third, a thin man with a scarred face, darted for the chest. Dunk swung his sword flat across the man's back. The impact dropped him like a sack of stones. He rolled, clutching a dagger, but Dunk pinned his wrist beneath his boot. "Who sent you?" Dunk demanded. The man spat blood. "You'll find out soon enough. Tell me, or I'll..." "You'll what, sir?" The man's smile was red and broken. "Kill me. Then you'll never know whose hand holds your leash." Before Dunk could answer, the man drove the dagger into his own throat. Blood spattered the floorboards, and the fire hissed as it touched the embers. Dunk stood still for a long moment, the sound of rain whispering against the roof. Then he turned to the chest. It was heavier than he'd guessed. The wax seal bore no mark of fray, but something far older. A dragon coiled upon itself, the same sigil he'd seen before. He felt heat radiating through the wood. He doused the fire, then carried the chest outside. Egg waited by the horses, eyes wide. "Is it?" "Aye," Dunk said. "Wildfire, and enough of it to light half the riverlands. What will we do with it?" Dunk looked to the river. "The alchemists say only their guild knows how to keep it safe, so we'll do what no alchemist would ever dare." He pried open the seal, careful as a man handling a viper, and tipped the chest toward the water. The jars inside clinked faintly. Then they fell, one after another, sinking into the slow current. For a heartbeat, the river glowed green beneath the surface. Then darkness swallowed it. Egg let out the breath he'd been holding. "Is it gone?" "Gone enough," Dunk said. "If the gods are kind." They rode on until dusk, putting miles between themselves and the mill. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled far to the east. Dunk's arm throbbed where the old wound from the infight had reopened, but he pressed on. They found shelter beneath a willow by the river. Egg lit a small fire while Dunk cleaned his blade. "Sir," the boy said quietly, "you think this will end it?" "No," Dunk said after a moment. "Not yet. The men who sent those riders will learn their cargo's gone, and they'll send more. They've gold enough and fools enough. But if wildfire's what they mean to use, they'll need someone skilled to make it. That means King's Landing." Egg frowned. "The Alchemists' Guild?" "Aye. Someone in their ranks must be selling it, or helping to move it. No wildfire leaves their cellars without coin or treachery." Egg poked the fire, his face shadowed by the flickering light. "Then we should go there." Dunk looked into the flames. "We should, but once we do, there'll be no turning back." The night deepened. Owls called in the distance, and the river murmured softly. Dunk dozed at last, but his dreams were restless. He saw a hall of green fire beneath the red keep, jars lined like candles, and a hooded figure pouring flame into the world. When he woke, the dawn was gray once more. The fog had returned, thicker than before. He rose, shaking off sleep. Egg was already awake, the horses saddled. "King's Landing?" the boy asked. "King's Landing," Dunk said. "If wildfire burns again, the truth lies there." They mounted and turned south, following the river as it wound toward the sea. Two travelers against the rising storm, carrying with them the memory of green fire and the promise of dragons long dead, yet somehow not forgotten. Behind them, unseen in the mist, the river flowed on. And deep beneath its surface, in the cold dark where the jars had sunk, a faint green light flickered once, then vanished into silence. The river road south toward King's Landing wound through a country both fair and forsaken. The war had passed here years ago, yet its shadow lingered. Broken towers, villages half rebuilt, and fields where the grass still grew black. Dunk and Egg rode in silence for much of the first day, the mist curling about them like ghosts. Dunk's thoughts were heavy. Every step of Thunder's hooves carried him closer to the capital, a place he would rather have avoided. Too many lords there, too many memories. He had worn his spurs among them once, in service to Prince Maikar, and had left with neither gold nor comfort. Yet wildfire was no matter for small folk or hedge knights. It was a danger that could swallow kingdoms. They made camp by the roadside beneath a great oak. The air smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke from some distant farm. Egg gathered kindling while Dunk washed his face in the stream. The water was cold and clear, and he caught sight of his own reflection. Older now, lines about the eyes, a scar along the jaw from a fight he scarcely remembered. "You're quiet tonight," Egg said, laying the fire. "Thinking," Dunk said. "About the wildfire. About what kind of men bring such things into the world. Wildfire's not a weapon for war. It's madness made flesh. The ones behind it, they mean more than murder. They mean ruin. Egg sat cross-legged beside him, chin in his hands. Maybe they think it's the only way to bring back the Black Dragon. Dunk snorted. The Black Dragon's been dead near 40 years. Men will follow ghosts if they think there's gold or glory at the end of it, but there's none here, only fire. The boy's eyes gleamed in the firelight, wide and troubled. My brothers used to say the Targaryens would never need wildfire again, that dragons would return one day. Dunk looked at him then, at the faint glimmer of silver hair hidden beneath his hood. Maybe they will, he said softly, but not from jars and green flame. When dragons return, they'll come from blood, not fire. Egg said nothing, but Dunk could see the thought settle in him like a stone in deep water. They broke camp before dawn and rode south again. The mists thinned by midday, revealing the road stretching before them, rutted and brown. They passed a troop of singers heading north, bright-cloaked, faces cheerful. One waved at them. "Safe roads, Sir Knight," the man called. Dunk raised a hand in reply, but did not slow. Too often he had seen laughter turn to weeping on such roads. By evening, they reached a crossroads where an old sept stood, its windows shattered, roof patched with straw. The septon who lived there was a kindly man with a long gray beard and eyes clouded by age. He gave them bread and salt and a bed of hay in the stable. When he learned their names, he nodded thoughtfully. "Sir Duncan the Tall, I heard of you once, long ago, at Ashford Meadow." Dunk stiffened. "You've a long memory, father." The old man smiled faintly. "The gods grant it to few, and I use it poorly. But I remember the tales, how a hedge knight won honor without gold or name. There are not many such left in the world." Egg listened in silence as Dunk changed the subject. He had no wish for the boy to hear again of the trial by combat, or of the princes and lords who had stood against him. Those were old wounds, better left unpicked. The septon spoke of the road ahead. "There's unrest in the Crownlands," he said. "Men whisper of ships lost in the Blackwater, burned without cause. Some say pirates, others fire from the gods." Dunk met his gaze. "Fire from men, more like." The septon's brows furrowed. "Then may the seven guide you, sir. If you go to the city, be wary. There's rot in its stones these days, too much coin, too little faith." They left at first light. By noon, the air had grown warmer, and the smell of the sea rode on the wind. Egg's spirits lifted. "Do you think we'll see the Red Keep by tomorrow?" "If the horses hold," Dunk said. They crossed a narrow bridge of worn stone, the river beneath them running green and slow. Beyond lay farmlands again, and the faint outline of a town. A column of smoke rose from its edge. Dunk slowed. "That's no hearth fire." As they neared, the smell reached them, ash and burnt grain. The town had been small once, little more than a handful of cottages and a mill. Now it was ruin. Walls blackened, roofs fallen in, fields scorched. A few folk wandered like ghosts through the wreckage. A woman stood beside the road, clutching a babe wrapped in rags. Her face was streaked with soot. "What happened here?" Dunk asked her. "Fire," she said hollowly. "Came from the river, green fire. Took the boats, the barns, everything." Dunk's heart sank. "When?" 3 nights past. He looked toward the water. The river here ran wide and slow, its surface shining like polished jade. And beneath that shine, yes, faint but visible, a pulse of green light. Egg saw it too. "Sir." Dunk dismounted, boots sinking into the wet soil. He knelt by the bank. The faint glow shimmered, deep below. Somehow, impossibly, the wildfire he had cast into the current had drifted here, cracked loose. rising from the mud like a living thing. "Seven save us," he whispered. "It's spreading." They stayed long enough to help bury the dead and warn the survivors to move inland. Then Dunk turned south again, grim-faced. The jars had not sunk harmlessly as he'd hoped. The current had carried them onward, breaking them as they went. That night, they camped on a hill overlooking the dark ribbon of the Blackwater Rush. The sky was heavy with clouds, and in the distance, faint flashes of green flickered on the water. Egg's voice was small. "It's like it's alive." "Aye," Dunk said. "Wildfire is alive. That's why the alchemists fear it as much as they worship it." He stared long into the night until the last flickers faded. The wind smelled of salt now. They were close enough to see the faint red glow of King's Landing on the horizon when dawn came. "There it is," Egg said softly. "The City of Kings." Dunk nodded. "And the City of Lies. Keep your wits about you, lad. Once we pass those gates, truth will burn faster than fire." As they rode down toward the city, the rising sun caught on the walls of the Red Keep, red gold against the sea, proud and high. But in the harbor below, ships lay blackened and still smoking. The scent of burnt pitch hung on the wind, mingled with something sharper, something foul and sweet all at once, the smell of wildfire. Dunk tightened his reins. "We're too late for warnings," he said. "Now we find who's to blame." Egg looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. "And if it's someone close to the throne?" "Then all the worse," Dunk said, "for the fire doesn't care whose crown it burns." They rode on into the shadow of the gates as the City of Kings waited, uneasy, glittering, and already trembling with the promise of ruin. The gates of King's Landing loomed high and black before them, streaked with soot and the scars of old sieges. The guards at Mudgate were restless, their armor dull with grime, their faces drawn from long watchfulness. Smoke drifted from the harbor beyond, twisting in the wind like dark ribbons. "Name yourself," the captain barked when Dunk rained thunder before the gate. "Sir Duncan the Tall, sworn knight of the realm," Dunk replied. "And this is my squire. We come bearing warning for the hand of the king." The captain looked him over, suspicious. "The hand hears no beggars." "I'm no beggar," Dunk said, his voice hard as stone. "But if he ignores this warning, there'll be beggars aplenty when the city burns again." The man hesitated, then spat. "Go on then. You'll find the Red Keep still standing, for now." He waved them through, and the gate creaked open like the jaws of a beast. Inside, the city was a hive of noise and fear. The air stank of smoke, salt, and the ever-present rot of the gutters. Merchants shouted half-heartedly in the market squares, though few lingered to buy. Men whispered of ships that had gone up in green fire upon the tide, their masts melting like candles. As they climbed Aegon's high hill, Egg tugged his hood low. "Sir," he whispered, "the people, they're frightened." "They've cause," Dunk said. "A city of wood and pitch sits above vaults of wildfire. All it takes is one fool with a spark." The Red Keep loomed above them, crimson in the sun. Its towers cut against the sky like blades. The gates were watched by gold cloaks, stern and silent. When Dunk gave his name again, they led him through the long halls, past courtiers who glanced their way with disdain. Mud still clung to Dunk's boots. His cloak was patched and worn, but no man there stood taller. They waited long in the Hall of the Hand, its walls lined with banners of the realm. When at last the doors opened, a lean man in a black doublet stepped forward, gray at the temples and sharp of eye. "I am Sir Roland Caron, speaking for the Hand," he said. The Lord Hand is indisposed. Dunk inclined his head. Then he'd best be disposed soon, sir. Wildfire's loose upon the rivers. I've seen it myself. Barrels bearing the Blackfire mark, men slain carrying their master's seal. Karen frowned. The Blackfires are dust, Sir Knight. Tell that to the dead in the riverlands, Dunk said, and to the smoke rising from your harbor. The man's composure faltered. You've proof of what you say? Some burned corpses, a melted helm, and a chest I threw into the Trident. The current carried it south. What burned your ships, if not wildfire? Karen's mouth tightened. The pyromancers assure us it was an accident. A fault in one of their vaults. An accident? Dunk's temper rose. If that's so, they've grown careless beyond forgiveness. And if it isn't, then someone's turned their vaults to treason. Egg shifted uneasily at his side, but said nothing. Sir Roland studied Dunk a long moment. You're the knight they call the Tall. I'd heard of you, and of the boy. I'll take your warning to the hand. But mind yourself, sir. The city's restless. Men vanish for less than talk of treason. I've no fear of vanishing, Dunk said. I've too much height for hiding. The knight's mouth twitched at that, a ghost of a smile, but his eyes were wary. Go then, but if you value your neck, speak no more of wildfire beyond these walls. They were escorted out, and as they stepped back into the light, Dunk saw the first tongues of smoke rising again from the harbor. The hand's a fool if he waits, he muttered. Egg followed close behind. Maybe he's frightened. Then he's unfit for the office, Dunk said. A king's hand should grip iron, not tremble. They made for the Street of Sisters, where the Alchemists' Guild kept their hall, a fortress of pale stone, its doors marked with the sigil of a burning flask. The scent of brimstone hung thick in the air. An acolyte in green robes met them at the gate. Sir, the guild is not receiving visitors. They'll receive me, Dunk said, stepping forward, or they'll answer to the ashes. The man paled and vanished within. Moments later, they were brought to a chamber deep beneath the hall, its walls lined with copper jars and strange brass tubes that hissed softly. The master of the guild awaited them, a thin man with skin like parchment and eyes too bright to be sane. I am Master Garrigus, he said. You have questions. I've more than questions, Dunk said. Wildfire's loose in the riverlands and in your harbor. I've seen its glow. You claim to guard it. How did it escape? Garrigus smiled faintly. Wildfire is willful, Sir Knight. It has a nature of its own. Don't feed me riddles. Men are dead. Men are always dead, the pyromancer murmured. But you speak of loss, not of blame. The jars that vanished were taken from us weeks ago, by whose hand we cannot say. The cells were sealed, yet the fire was gone. We reported the theft to the hand. And he did nothing? The man's smile widened. He did what hands do, reached for what he desired. Dunk frowned. You're saying, I say only this, Garrigus said softly. That wildfire does not choose its masters. It burns for whoever dares to claim it. And of late, many have dared. He turned away then, as if the matter were settled. You'd best go, Sir Knight. The air here grows perilous. Dunk wanted to seize him by the throat and shake answers loose, but the stench of the place made his head swim. He turned on his heel and strode out. Outside, the city thundered with noise, shouts from the docks, bells from the seps. A haze of green smoke clung over the harbor. Egg looked to him anxiously. What did he mean? That someone in the Red Keep? Maybe, Dunk said. Or maybe he meant to frighten us off. But there's truth in his fear. Someone's using the guild's fire for their own ends. They climbed higher into the city, toward the great sept whose domes caught the dying light. From there, they could see the harbor spread below, and amid the ships, a sudden bloom of emerald flame. The explosion came a heartbeat later, a roar that shook the ground. Dunk threw himself over Egg as shards of glass and ash rained from the sky. When the fire's light faded, half the harbor was burning. The sea itself burned. Egg's face was white. "Sir, it's spreading." Dunk rose, heart pounding. "Then the city's lost unless we stop it." He turned toward the Red Keep, its towers wreathed now in green haze. Bells clanged in alarm. "Come, Egg," he said grimly. "If treason lives in that castle, we'll drag it into the light before we burn with it." The boy swallowed hard, then nodded, and together they pushed through the panic of the streets, smoke curling around them, the glow of wildfire painting the night an unholy green. And above it all, from the high towers of the keep, a single banner fluttered, crimson, gold, and black, as though some dragon unseen had begun to stir once more. The night blazed green above King's Landing. From the high walls of the Red Keep to the far piers of the harbor, the light of wildfire painted everything in ghostly hues. Bells tolled from the great sept, their mournful clang swallowed by the roar of fire and the screams of men and beasts. Dunk and Egg fought their way uphill through streets choked with smoke. The air was so thick it stung the eyes, and ash rained down like gray snow. People fled past them, mothers clutching children, old men dragging carts, gold cloaks shouting orders no one obeyed. Somewhere, a wine store had caught flame, and the smell of burning fruit clung to the air like rot. Egg coughed behind his sleeve. "Sir, the whole city's—" "I see it," Dunk said grimly. "Stay close." They passed through Flea Bottom, where the poorest lived, and even here the wildfire had found its way. Little tongues of green fire crawling along the gutters, clinging to the puddles. Dunk kicked one out and it hissed, leaving smoke that burned his throat. Gods curse the man who loosed this. By the time they reached the hill of Visenya, the worst of the fire was behind them, but the city still burned below. Dunk looked back and saw the harbor ablaze, ships melting into the water like wax. The sea glowed green as if the very gods were watching through it. When they came to the Red Keep's gate, they found it barred. A dozen gold cloaks stood guard, their armor blackened with soot. "Halt there!" the captain cried. "No one enters without leave of the Hand." "The Hand's left this city to burn," Dunk said. "I've come to find the one who lit the fire." "Who are you to make such a claim?" "Sir Duncan the Tall," Dunk answered, voice rising over the din. "If the Hand wants the truth buried, he'll have to throw me on the pyre himself." The captain hesitated, studying the smoke-streaked night before him. Something in Dunk's voice, or perhaps the wildfire's glow behind him, made the man step aside. "You'll find the Hand in Maegor's Holdfast, sir, but mind your step. The court's at war with itself tonight." War within the castle was no new thing in Westeros. Dunk had seen enough noble quarrels to know how quickly they turned bloody. He crossed the courtyard, boots crunching on fallen tiles, and entered through the great doors. The air within was thick and hot. Courtiers ran like ants in panic. Servants hauled buckets of water toward the windows. The smell of smoke mixed with perfume and fear. A page in crimson livery stumbled into them. "Sir, you shouldn't be here. The Hand has—" "I'll speak with him," Dunk said, pushing past. They found the Hand in the council chamber. Lord Mandan Staidman, a gaunt man with eyes like old iron, stood by the table, his fingers clenching and unclenching. Beside him, Sir Roland Caron, the same knight who had met Dunk before, was shouting over the din. "The pyromancers swear it was sabotage," Karen said. "Someone breached their vaults." "Sabotage?" Stademon snarled. "You call that sabotage? Half the fleet is gone. The king's ships, the grain barges, burned to cinders." Dunk stepped forward. "My lord hand." Both men turned. Stademon's glare could have carved stone. "Who let this fool in?" "I let myself in," Dunk said. "You've wildfire burning your harbor, and the black fire mark burned into your city. This isn't accident. It's treason." The hand's expression flickered. "And what do you know of treason, Hedge Knight?" "I know the stench of it," Dunk replied, "and I've been smelling it since the Trident. Men carrying wildfire in barrels, saying they serve the true dragon. Someone here gave them that fire." Karen's face went pale. The alchemists said the jars were stolen," Dunk cut in. "And they said someone in this castle let it happen." The hand's knuckles whitened on the table. "You speak boldly for one without proof." "Proof enough lies on the riverbank and in your harbor," Dunk said. "How many more need to burn before you act?" Stademan's lips thinned. "You overstep yourself, sir. This is the realm's business." "I serve the realm," Dunk said, voice steady. "And if its lords won't protect it, then it falls to knights who still remember their vows." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Karen spoke, low and cautious. "My lord, perhaps we should hear him. If he's right, and there's more wildfire." Stademan slammed his hand upon the table. "Enough! The city burns, and you waste time on a hedge knight's tales." But before he could say more, a messenger burst through the doors, breathless and ashen-faced. "My lord, the vaults beneath the keep, they're aflame." The hand went white. "The vaults?" "The wildfire vaults, my lord. The pyromancers say the fire's spreading. They cannot control it." For a moment, no one moved. Then Dunk was already running. He knew the way from his time in the keep years ago, the long stair spiraling down beneath the cellars, where the alchemists kept their cursed stock. The heat grew with each step. By the time he reached the lower level, the air shimmered like the breath of a forge. The tunnel walls glowed faintly green. Ahead, firelight danced behind the iron doors of the vault. Men shouted within, trying to douse it with sand and water. Dunk pushed past them. The heat struck him like a hammer. Inside, the shelves had begun to melt. Jars burst like glass fruit, spraying tongues of emerald fire. A single man stood amid the inferno, a figure cloaked in black, holding a torch. "Stop!" Dunk roared, drawing his sword. The figure turned, and for an instant the light caught his face. Dunk saw the serpent eyes, the cruel curve of the mouth, the same man who had fled the marshes, or his twin. "You again," the man said. "Still chasing ghosts?" "You started this," Dunk said. "Why?" "For the dragon," the man hissed, "for the blood that sleeps." He flung the torch into the nearest rack. Fire roared upward, green and hungry. Dunk charged. The man met him with a knife, but Dunk's blade struck first, cutting through cloak and bone. The figure fell, screaming as the fire caught him. Dunk grabbed a fallen blanket, wrapped it around his arm, and tore the door open. The air whooshed out in a wave of heat. "Out!" he shouted to the others. "All of you!" They fled up the stairs as the vault collapsed behind them. The keep trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. Dunk half carried a wounded guard through the smoke. When they reached the courtyard, the sky above was burning green, the flames licking at the lowest towers. Gold cloaks and servants ran in terror. Egg appeared from the shadows, coughing. "Sir! Dunk seized him by the shoulder. "We're leaving." They rode from the Red Keep as the bells tolled once more. Behind them, King's Landing burned, not as it had in war, but with the unnatural light of wildfire unleashed. From the hills beyond the city, Dunk looked back. The Red Keep glowed like a candle in a storm, its towers wreathed in green smoke. Beside him, Egg's face was pale with awe and horror. "Will it stop, sir?" he whispered. Dunk shook his head slowly. "Fire always stops. It burns until there's nothing left to eat." They stood a while longer, watching as the city of kings flickered beneath the darkening sky, beautiful, terrible, and doomed to smolder for nights to come. At last, Dunk turned away. "Come, lad. There's nothing more we can do here." Egg followed in silence. The road ahead was long, the night deep. Behind them, a single column of green light still burned over the black water, twisting skyward, as if some dragon, unseen and vengeful, had drawn breath once more. By dawn, the storm of fire had broken, though the sky above King's Landing still glowed with a sickly haze. From the distant hills where Dunk and Egg had found shelter, the city appeared as a great smoldering ruin, its towers dark silhouettes against the pallid morning. Only the Red Keep yet stood unbroken, though even its walls bore streaks of black and green. Dunk had slept little. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw again the face of the man in the vault, the mad devotion, the gleam of triumph, even as the flames took him. The words still rang in his ears. For the dragon, for the blood that sleeps. Now the knight sat upon a fallen log, sharpening his sword with slow, steady strokes. Egg knelt nearby, tending the horses, his face drawn and weary beyond his years. "The fire's dying," the boy said softly. Dunk looked toward the city. "Aye, but its shadow won't fade so quick. The smell will cling to those stones for 100 years." They broke their fast in silence, hard bread, a slice of dried meat. When they were done, Dunk rose and shouldered his pack. "We go back," he said. Egg's eyes widened. "Back? To the city? After the truth," Dunk said. "Someone loosed that fire. The man I slew was no master, only another pawn. There's someone higher, and I mean to find him before the court buries the ashes." The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Then I'll ride with you." They set off as the sun rose. The air was thick with smoke, the wind still tainted by the stench of pitch and death. Along the roadside they passed refugees trudging away from the capital, ragged folk, faces gray with soot, their lives stuffed into carts or carried on their backs. None spared Dunk a glance. A night was no comfort to them now. When the city gates came into view again, they stood half open. Gold cloaks worked among the rubble, hauling bodies and pouring sand upon smoldering wreckage. The walls themselves were scorched and cracked. A captain recognized Dunk as he approached and scowled. "You again? You've a habit of walking into fire, Sir Knight." "I've business within," Dunk said. "You'll find little left to serve your business. The hand's dead, burned in the keep with half his council." Dunk paused. "Dead?" The captain nodded grimly. "Aye. They say he fell when the vaults went up. The king's taken the blame upon himself. Called it an accident of the alchemists. There'll be no trial." "No trial," Dunk echoed. "Then there'll be no truth either." He pressed on into the city. The streets were eerily quiet, ash drifting like snow in the wind. Blackened walls gaped open where homes had been, and the air held a low, constant hum, the sound of embers still whispering beneath the ruins. At the great sept, priests moved among the dead, laying out rows of charred bodies beneath sheets. Dunk stopped to help where he could, lifting timbers, fetching water. He was no lord to command men, but he could still serve. A septa approached him as he worked, her face streaked with soot. "You're no city knight," she said. "Your hands are too rough for silk." "I'm no city knight," Dunk agreed. "You fought to save it, though." "Tried," he said. "Failed." She gave him a tired smile. The gods see effort as well as victory. He wished he believed her. By noon, they reached the Red Keep once more. Smoke still rose from its eastern towers, but the great gates stood open. The gold cloaks at their post saluted wearily as Dunk passed. Within, the courtyard was strewn with rubble. The banners had been torn down or burned. Only the great dragon of House Targaryen still flew, half scorched but defiant. Inside the ruined hall, Dunk found Sir Roland Carron alive though battered, his arm bound in a sling. The knight looked up as they entered, relief and disbelief mingling on his face. "7 take me. I thought you dead," Karen said. "Not yet," Dunk replied. "I heard the hands gone." Karen nodded. "Gone, aye. Burned with the vault. The king's grief is measured. He's more concerned with finding someone to blame." "Then he won't have to look far," Dunk said. "The man I killed in the vault spoke of serving the dragon. The Blackfires still move in secret. That's clear enough now." Karen's face darkened. "You think they reached the court?" "I think they reached deeper than we guessed. The wildfire came from here, from within these walls. Someone with coin and courage enough to steal from the alchemists. That's no small man." Karen ran a hand through his soot-streaked hair. "The king won't listen to talk of treason. He's calling this a mistake of craft and negligence." "Then the truth will rot beneath his feet," Dunk said. "Maybe so," Karen replied quietly. "But it will be a quiet rot. Best leave it buried. The city needs calm." Dunk stared at him. "You'd rather peace built on lies?" The other man met his gaze. "Better lies than another war." For a moment, Dunk said nothing. Then he turned away. "Wars don't come from truth, Sir Roland. They come from the men who hide it." He left the keep soon after, the taste of ash bitter in his mouth. The streets were calmer by evening, though the air still shimmered with heat. Egg rode beside him in silence, until at last he spoke. "Will there be war again, sir?" "There's always war somewhere," Dunk said. "But this was something worse, a war that never needed swords." They passed through the river gate and out along the road that led westward, away from the sea. Behind them, the city faded into the haze, its smoke blending with the clouds. At a bend in the road, they stopped to rest. The sun hung low, casting red light over the water. Dunk sat on a rock, his great hands resting upon his knees. "The Blackfires won't stop," he said. "They'll strike again when the realm grows soft and forgets this day." Egg gazed toward the horizon, his young face hardening. "Then we won't let it grow soft." Dunk smiled faintly. "You've your grandsire's fire in you, lad." Egg met his eyes. "And you've his courage, sir." For a long while they watched the sky turn from red to gold to gray. The smoke on the wind carried with it the faintest hint of brimstone, but the world beyond was quiet. At last Dunk rose, stretching his long limbs. "Come, Egg. We'll find an inn before nightfall. The road waits." As they rode on, the city's glow dwindled behind them until only a faint shimmer remained, neither wholly green nor gone, a ghost's breath on the wind. Dunk did not look back again. The road ahead was rough, but it was clean. The air smelled of grass and rain, not fire. And somewhere far off, unseen, the Trident's waters whispered as they always had, carrying away ash and memory alike. Yet even as they vanished into the dusk, the night could not shake the sense that something still watched from behind. A memory, a name, a dragon's shadow. The Blackfire cause had burned before and would burn again. For fire, once kindled, was not so easily forgotten. And so the hedge knight and his squire rode onward, beneath a sky washed pale with smoke, bearing in their hearts the knowledge of what they had seen, that men were the truest dragons of all, and their flames the hardest to quench. For 3 days they rode west, leaving the smoking crown of the city behind them. The hills grew greener, the air clearer, and yet the scent of ash seemed to follow, faint but ever present. Dunk said little on the road, his mind turning over what had been lost, and what truths still lay buried under the red keep. Egg, though quiet, watched his knight with an anxious gaze. The boy had changed in the space of a few days. His laughter had gone. The firelight no longer caught joy in his eyes, only reflection. He had seen what wildfire could do, what men could do. And though he said nothing of it, Dunk knew the lesson had burned itself deep into him. On the 4th morning they reached a small riverside village called Wendwater, its fields unscathed by flame. Smoke rose only from cook fires here, and the folk looked upon the travelers with wary curiosity. Dunk and Egg took shelter at an inn by the river, a squat, timbered place called the Cask and Eel. The sign above the door had half faded, but warmth spilled from the windows, and that was welcome enough. The innkeep was a red-faced woman with a strong arm and a sharper tongue. "Rooms, is it?" she said, eyeing Dunk's height and the sword at his hip. "You'll have to duck through the doorways, sir, or I'll be patching lintels all week." Dunk smiled faintly. "I've broken worse." They paid in coppers what little they had left and settled by the fire. A few farmers shared ale and gossip nearby, and soon their talk drifted toward the strangers. "Did you hear it?" one man said. "The green fire in the capital. Some say it was dragons come again." "Dragons, huh?" said another. "That's a tale for children. It was the king's own folly, that's what. Too much gold and too little sense." A third man, older, spat into the hearth. "No, I'll tell you. My cousin's boy serves the gold cloaks. He said they found black banners in the wreckage. Black with a red dragon. The old pretender's mark. Blackfires." At that, Egg looked up sharply, but Dunk put a hand on his arm. "Listen, don't speak." "Blackfires are dead," the second man said. "Dead men don't send ships to burn," the elder replied. "Dead men don't whisper in the ears of lords. I tell you, the realm's not rid of them. Never will be, so long as bastards dream of crowns." The innkeep scolded them for frightening the other patrons, but the talk left its chill behind. Dunk felt it settle like frost beneath his breastplate. He had fought for peace all his life, yet peace seemed ever like a fire's ember, glowing bright for a moment, then dying when the wind came. After supper, Dunk went out to the riverbank. The moon hung low, and the water shone pale beneath it. He crouched and let his fingers trail through the current. The Trident's waters carried secrets. That much he had learned. The wildfire he'd cast into it had not died, but found its way to the city. What else might the river carry, unseen? Egg joined him quietly. "Sir," he said after a moment, "will they come for us? The ones who served the Black Dragon?" Dunk looked at him. "If they come, we'll face them. But their war's not ours, lad. Ours is to keep men like them from burning the world." Egg frowned. "Sometimes I think the world's already burning. You can't see the flames, but they're there." Dunk said nothing. The boy's words struck harder than any sword. The next morning they left Windwater and turned north, following the road towards Stony Sept. The countryside rolled in gentle hills, dotted with orchards and copses of elm. By noon, the air had grown sweet with spring bloom, and for the first time in days, the wind carried no scent of smoke. They passed a tinker on the road, his wagon piled high with pots and ironware. He hailed them cheerfully, eager for company. "You've heard the tales then," he said as his mule plodded beside Thunder. "Of the green fire that ate the sea?" Dunk grunted. "Aye. They say a dragon rose out of it," the tinker went on. "A great green beast with wings of smoke flew west, they say, toward the Trident." Egg's brows drew together. "Did anyone see it?" "Oh, a dozen saw it, or claimed they did. You know how tales grow. Every man sees the beast bigger than the last." The tinker chuckled. "Still, who's to say what's true? Strange things walk the world again. A man can feel it." Dunk rode in silence after that. He had seen no dragon in the fire, only death. Yet the image lingered. In the glow of the wildfire, in the scream of that dying man, there had been something like a dragon's breath. Perhaps tales were only truths seen through smoke. They parted ways with the tinker at a fork in the road. As evening fell, they reached a ridge overlooking the river valley. Below lay the ruins of an old watchtower, its stones weathered and gray. Dunk decided they'd make camp there. He gathered wood while Egg fetched water. When the fire was kindled, they sat together beneath the stars. Crickets sang in the grass. The night felt almost peaceful. "Sir," Egg said softly, "if the black fires do rise again, who will stop them?" Dunk stared into the flames. "The realm will, if it remembers what fire does, and if it forgets." He shook his head. "Then men like us will stand again, one small sword against the storm. That's all a knight can do." The boy nodded solemnly. "Then we'll stand." Dunk smiled faintly. "Aye, lad, we will." They spoke no more that night. The fire crackled low, throwing long shadows across the ruins. In the distance, the river whispered, soft, endless, carrying away the ashes of kings. When Dunk finally lay down to rest, he dreamed of dragons, not golden or black, but green, fire made flesh, rising from the shallows of the Trident. He saw himself standing before it, sword in hand, and behind him, the boy with silver hair. The beast bowed its head, and its eyes burned like two suns. He woke at dawn with sweat on his brow. The world was gray and quiet. Egg still slept, curled beside the dying fire. Dunk watched the boy for a long moment, then rose and looked eastward. The smoke above the distant horizon had faded at last. King's Landing was a smudge in the morning haze, no longer glowing, but still there, stubborn, scarred, and alive. "Alive," Dunk murmured. "For now." He turned to the west, to the road winding toward the unknown. "Come, Egg," he said as the first light touched the land. "Let's see what the realm looks like after dragons." And so they rode on, two travelers bound by fire and fate, following the road wherever it might lead, through fields reborn, across rivers washed clean, and toward the long shadow of whatever storm awaited beyond the hills. Spring crept slow across the riverlands, as if the land itself had grown cautious of rebirth. Green shoots rose between the ashes, and the air carried the scent of damp earth rather than smoke. Dunk and Egg followed the Trident northward, keeping to the lesser roads, sleeping beneath hedges or in the barns of kindly farmers who had heard nothing yet of wildfire or kings. The land was beautiful still. By day, sunlight scattered across the river like spilled gold. By night, the moon floated in the black water, serene as a prayer. Dunk would have liked to let the peace of it mend the ache in his heart. Yet each time he looked upon the calm current, he saw again the ghostly shimmer of green light beneath, and heard the hiss of wildfire devouring all it touched. One afternoon, as they passed through a copse of birch trees, Egg asked, "Sir, where will we go now?" Dunk gave a grunt. "Where there's work. A knight's belly won't fill itself, nor will your stomach, little lordling." The boy smiled faintly. He did not bristle at the jest as once he might have. "There's always work for a sword, but not always for a good one. I heard the Septon say once that peace is a curse to knights. Peace is a blessing to all men," Dunk said, "but a knight's coin runs out quicker than his honor when there's no war. We'll find service somewhere." They reached Maidenpool by dusk. The town still bore scars from the wars of their fathers, walls patched with timber, half the docks rebuilt, but it smelled of salt and trade rather than smoke. Dunk sold their spare horse for coin and found them a meal of bread and stew. At the inn's hearth, talk turned, as always, to rumors. A merchant with a scarred lip spoke of trouble upriver. "A band of riders came through last week," he said. "Wore no colors, but they had gold enough to buy silence. One of them left behind a chest he said was filled with spices. When the innkeep opened it later, he found a jar inside. Shattered. The place burned before he could call for water." Egg glanced at Dunk, eyes wide. Dunk's face hardened. "And these men, where were they bound?" "West, toward Fairmarket," the merchant said. "They rode swift, like they feared pursuit." Dunk set down his cup. "Then we'll ride west too." They left at first light. The road grew rougher beyond Maidenpool, winding between rolling hills and thin woods. Villages lay scattered, their folk wary and quick to bar their doors. The further west they went, the more whispers they heard. Fires on the river banks, cattle slain and branded with black dragon sigils, men claiming to serve a lord who called himself the Dragon's Hand. By the 5th day, Dunk was certain. The Blackfire cause lived still, flickering like an ember waiting for breath. It was near sunset when they came upon a lonely holdfast by the water. The gate hung half open, and smoke drifted lazily from its chimney. Dunk dismounted cautiously. "Stay close," he told Egg. "Something's wrong here." They entered the yard to find the place deserted. Chickens pecked in the dust. A dog whined from a tethered post. In the hall, the hearth still smoldered, though no man sat the benches. Dunk stepped forward and saw the blood on the floorboards. It was not fresh, but it had been spilled freely. A dozen men, perhaps more. The scent of iron lingered. Egg's face went pale. "What happened here?" he whispered. Dunk knelt, studying the tracks. "Riders came through, took what they wanted, left the rest to rot. These weren't bandits." He moved to the high table, where a parchment lay pinned beneath a dagger. The seal was cracked, the wax black as pitch. He drew it free and read, "For those who still serve the blood of dragons, the fire shall not die. Gather at Fairmarket beneath the black banner, and the world will remember who were the true kings." Dunk crushed the parchment in his fist. "So it's begun again!" That night, they camped by the river's edge. The wind hissed through the reeds like a whispering crowd. Dunk stared into the small fire, his face carved in shadow. "Sir," Egg said quietly, "you mean to go to Fairmarket?" "Aye. It'll be dangerous." "It always is." Egg's voice trembled slightly. "The Blackfires tried to burn the city, and now they'll burn the realm." Dunk nodded. "And if they do, it'll fall to those who remember their vows to stand in their way. A knight's oath means nothing until it's tested." They rose at dawn, the sky bruised with clouds. Rain fell steady all that day, turning the road to mud, but they pressed on. By the next evening, they saw Fairmarket's lights glimmering through the mist. The town lay at the crossing of river and road, its market stalls closed for the night. A handful of soldiers patrolled the streets, their cloaks sodden. Dunk left Egg at an inn and went to seek news. He found it quickly enough, a stranger in a hooded cloak slipping from a warehouse near the docks. Dunk followed, silent as a shadow. The man led him through winding alleys to a tavern by the water, its windows shuttered tight. Inside, voices murmured low. Dunk crept to the side door and peered through a crack. Half a dozen men sat at a table, their faces lit by candlelight. At their head was a tall, pale knight in dark armor. His cloak bore no sigil, but the sword at his side was forged black as night. "Soon the lords will see the truth," the knight said. "The blood of dragons does not fade. The fire in the capital was but the first spark." "And this time?" one of the others asked. "What of the King's Guard, the Loyalists?" "They'll burn like all the rest," the pale knight said. "Our Lord has allies even within their ranks. When the time comes, the banners will rise again. And this time, none shall put them down." Dunk had heard enough. He stepped through the door, sword drawn. "Not while I breathe." The men leapt to their feet, hands going for blades. The fight was fast and brutal. Dunk's great sword cut through the first man's guard, and the room filled with the crash of steel. The pale knight met him blow for blow, his dark sword hissing through the smoke. "You're too late, Hedge Knight," the man sneered. "The black dragon wakes." Dunk's answer was a swing that shattered the man's guard and sent him sprawling. "Then he'll find me waiting." When it was done, the tavern was silent save for the hiss of rain through the broken shutters. Dunk leaned on his sword, breathing hard. He found a chest behind the table, filled not with gold, but sealed jars that glimmered faintly green in the dim light. "7 hells," he muttered. "More wildfire." By the time Egg arrived, panting, the firelight danced on the knight's weary face. "Is it over, sir?" Dunk looked at the broken jars, then at the river beyond. "For now." He sheathed his sword and stepped to the doorway, staring out into the rain. "But it never truly ends, lad. Not while men keep kindling the same fires." Egg followed his gaze. "Then we'll just have to keep putting them out." Dunk smiled faintly. "Aye, that we will." The rain fell harder, washing the blood from the cobbles, and in the distance, thunder rolled across the river. Not the roar of dragons, but something like it, echoing through the dark. The storm lingered over Fairmarket for 2 days, dark and relentless. Rain drummed upon the rooftops and turned the roads to rivers, washing blood, soot, and ash alike toward the Trident. Dunk and Egg remained within the inn, the common room dim and heavy with damp. The innkeep muttered of curses, of the Seven's wrath, but Dunk said nothing. He sat by the fire, oiling his sword, the flames glinting on the steel as if on water. They had turned the jars of wildfire over to the town bailiff, though Dunk doubted the man understood what he held. Better the jars were buried deep or hurled into the river than left for fools to tamper with. Still, even buried fire could burn again one day. Egg returned from the market near sundown, soaked to the bone. "Sir," he said breathlessly, "men are speaking your name. They're saying you slew a Blackfire knight by the docks." Dunk sighed. "Folk love their tales. I slew a man, aye, but whether he was knight or sellsword, I couldn't tell you. He had a black sword, sir, and the men you fought, those weren't mere brigands." Dunk looked into the flames. No, they weren't. He sheathed his sword and rose. "We can't linger here. If any of their friends live, they'll come looking. Egg frowned. Where will we go? North, for now. Away from this cursed river. Away from the fire. By dawn, the storm had eased. Mist rose from the soaked fields, and the world smelled of wet earth and spring grass. They rode out before the town fully woke, following a track that wound through low hills dotted with budding trees. The river ran beside them, brown with floodwater, its voice soft but ceaseless. For a while they rode in silence. The rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather, the whisper of rain on leaves. All these small sounds felt almost holy after the chaos of the city. At midday they passed a burned village, nothing left but stone chimneys and charred beams. Dunk dismounted to look closer. Among the ashes, he found the sign of the three-headed dragon, scorched black against a wall. It was not the crimson dragon of the Targaryens, but the reversed colors of the Blackfire line, black upon red. He spat into the dirt. They're still spreading their poison. Egg looked around with wide eyes. Who would do this? These were small folk. The same men who set wildfire in the capital, Dunk said. They'd burn the world to prove their blood's worth something. He stood for a long moment, watching smoke drift from the ruined chimneys like ghosts refusing to leave. Then he swung back into the saddle. Come, nothing to be done for the dead. By evening, they reached a crossroads where a sept stood beneath an ancient oak. Its whitewashed walls were weathered, and its bell hung silent, but the door stood open. Inside, candles flickered before the seven. Dunk and Egg knelt for a moment of quiet. The septon was an old man, bald save for a fringe of white, with kind eyes and hands rough from work. Travelers? He asked softly. You look weary. Dunk nodded. We've seen too much fire for one lifetime. The septon sighed. Aye, there's talk of dragons again. Always dragons. Men chasing fire as if it were gold. They forget fire devours. Egg's gaze lingered on the statues. The father, the warrior, the maiden. His lips moved soundlessly, as though in prayer. When they left, he seemed distant. Sir, he said as they mounted, why do men follow such causes? The Blackfires lost long ago, yet still they rise again. What keeps them? Pride, Dunk said. And hunger. Some men would rather starve on a lie than eat the bread of peace. That night, they camped on a ridge overlooking the Trident. The stars shone clear for the first time in many nights, and the river gleamed silver beneath them. Dunk sat by the fire sharpening his dagger, while Egg dozed beside the horses. For a time, all was still. Then came the faint sound of hooves. Dunk's head lifted. He rose silently, peering into the dark. 3 riders emerged from the trees, cloaked, armed, their faces hidden by the night. Stay back, Egg, Dunk murmured. The riders halted a dozen paces away. The tallest dismounted, pushing back his hood. His hair was white as frost, his eyes pale gray. Sir Duncan the Tall, he said calmly, you've made yourself known in these parts. Depends who's asking, Dunk replied. The man smiled thinly. I am Sir Darren Blackfire. The name means something still, I think. Egg gasped softly behind him, but Dunk did not move. You've no right to that name. Rights are taken, not granted, Darren said. You slew one of mine in fair market. You've interfered where you shouldn't. The fire you doused was meant to cleanse, not destroy. Cleanse? Dunk barked. You burned villages, children, innocents. Darren's gaze was cold. Innocents? There are none in this kingdom? Every soul serves one dragon or another. The weak burn so the strong may rise. It's the way of the world. You sound more pyromancer than knight, Dunk said, stepping forward. And like them, You'll burn in the end." Steel hissed from scabbards. The two men behind Darren drew blades, but he raised a hand. "No, this one's mine." They met in the clearing, swords ringing beneath the stars. Darren moved with deadly grace, his blade slender and black, a twin to the weapon Dunk had shattered in Fairmarket. He fought like a man born to flame, swift, fierce, unyielding. But Dunk was taller, stronger, and his strokes carried the weight of a hammer. Sparks flew where steel met steel. Egg watched from the shadows, eyes wide, fists clenched. "Yield!" Dunk shouted. "Never!" Darren spat, driving forward. His blade slid past Dunk's guard and scraped his mail, drawing blood. Dunk roared and struck back, his great sword cleaving downward. The black blade snapped in two. Darren stumbled, eyes wide with disbelief, and Dunk's pommel caught him full in the temple. He crumpled to the earth. The two other riders fled into the night. Dunk stood over the fallen man, chest heaving. Egg approached slowly. "Is he dead?" Dunk knelt, pressing fingers to the knight's throat. "Alive," he said. "For now." They bound Darren's hands and laid him by the fire. When dawn came, he stirred, blood crusted at his brow. "You should have killed me," he rasped. "I've killed enough men," Dunk said. "You'll stand trial, though gods know what justice means in these times." Darren laughed bitterly. "You think one death will end it? There are others. Always others. The black dragon sleeps, but his sons do not." Dunk looked east, toward the faint glow of sunrise. "Then we'll keep watch. As long as there are dragons, there'll be men like me to stand against them." Egg said nothing, but he looked upon Dunk with something like awe and fear. When the sun rose full, they rode toward River Run, Darren bound behind them, the river gleaming beside their path. The land seemed peaceful again, yet Dunk knew peace was only the quiet between storms. He glanced back once at the road they'd traveled, at the mist rising from the trident, and thought he saw a faint shimmer of green far downstream, a ghost of fire refusing to die. "Come on, lad," he said softly. "We've miles yet to go." And so the knight and his squire rode on, their shadows long upon the road, while the wind whispered through the reeds and the river carried the memory of dragons toward the sea. The sun was high when they reached the lands of House Tully, and the waters of the Red Fork gleamed broad and bright before them. The siege towers and camps that had once scarred these banks in the days of rebellion were long gone, replaced by fields heavy with barley and willows drooping low over the river's edge. Yet the quiet beauty of the place could not wash away the tension that clung to Dunk like a second skin. The Blackfire knight they had taken, Sir Darren, he called himself, rode bound upon a mule between them, wrists tied and eyes burning with pride undimmed by capture. He had said little since dawn, though a cruel smile often curved his mouth when he looked upon Egg. "You think your blood makes you noble," Darren said at last, his voice low and smooth as oil. "But it makes you pray, boy. Sooner or later fire finds its own." Egg's hands clenched on the reins. Dunk turned his head. "Another word to him, and you'll find your teeth in the mud." Darren chuckled softly. "Ah, there's the knight again, the giant with a heart too big for his armor. Tell me, Sir Duncan, how many wars must you fight before you learn that oaths and mercy are chains?" "I've seen what happens when men forget them," Dunk said. The Blackfire's smile faded. "Then you've seen the weak perish." He said nothing more, but his words lingered in the air like smoke. They reached a ferry crossing before sunset. The old ferryman took one look at Darren's bindings and muttered a prayer. "Trouble follows such men," he said. "You'd do better throwing him in the river." Justice isn't a river's work, Dunk replied. He paid the man and guided Thunder aboard. The ferry rocked as they crossed, the water gleaming gold and red beneath the setting sun. Beyond the crossing, the road wound through meadows bright with wildflowers. River Run's towers rose in the distance, their red stone walls shining in the dying light. Dunk felt a pang of weariness at the sight. The castle meant safety of a sort, but also politics, lords and letters, questions and caution. He would rather face a sword than a council table. Still, he had no choice. If there was to be any reckoning for the wildfire, for the men who sought to wake old dragons, it must begin here. The Tullys were loyal to the crown. At least they had been when last Dunk passed through these lands. By the time they reached the gates, night had fallen. The guards were wary at first, but when Dunk named himself and spoke of the prisoner he bore, they led him within. The great hall smelled of wood smoke and meat. Lord Simon Tully sat at the high table, broad of shoulder and gray of beard, his eyes bright and keen despite the years. "Sir Duncan the Tall," he said, rising to greet them. "It's been long since we saw your like in these parts. What brings you north with a chained knight in tow?" "Justice," Dunk said simply, and told the tale of the wildfire in the capital, of the fires along the Trident, and of the Blackfire men gathering once more in the Riverlands. As he spoke, murmurs filled the hall. When he was done, Lord Simon's face had grown grave. "The Blackfires again. God spare us. I thought that curse ended with Bittersteel's death." "Curses don't end," Dunk said. "They wait for men to remember them." Darren laughed then, sharp and bitter. "You speak of curses, sir, but it's loyalty that's the curse, blind faith in broken kings. The realm's sick because it kneels to a dying line. The Black Dragon will rise again, whether by my hand or another's." "Bind his tongue," Lord Simon said. "He'll find no ears for treason here." Guards dragged Darren away to the dungeons, but his laughter echoed through the hall long after he was gone. Later, when the feasting had ended and the hall grown quiet, Dunk and Egg were given chambers near the gatehouse. A servant brought food and wine, but neither ate much. Egg stood by the window, gazing out toward the river where moonlight danced upon the current. "Sir," he said softly, "do you think he's right? That the Black Dragon will rise again?" Dunk sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped. "Men like him always believe they're chosen by fate, but fate's just the name fools give to their hungers." Egg frowned. "But if they have wildfire still, then we'll find it," Dunk said. "We've faced worse." He hoped his voice sounded steadier than he felt. Before dawn, a horn's call tore through the castle. Dunk was already on his feet, sword in hand. Outside, shouts echoed from the yard. He threw open the door and saw fire. Not the green glow of wildfire, but red and yellow, leaping from the stables. Men ran shouting in the dark. "They're here!" someone screamed. Dunk raced down the stairs, Egg close behind. Smoke thickened the air. Shapes moved through the haze, riders in black cloaks, swords flashing. The Blackfires had come for their kin. Dunk met them in the yard. The first man charged, lance lowered, but Dunk's great sword sheared the shaft in two and cut him from the saddle. Another swung from behind. Dunk turned the blow and drove his pommel into the man's helm. The clangor of battle filled the night. Egg dragged a wounded guard from the flames, shouting for water. Arrows hissed through the smoke. The fire spread fast, fed by oil, planned, deliberate. From the corner of his eye, Dunk saw a figure on the battlements, tall, cloaked, holding a jar that shimmered faintly green. "7 hells," he muttered, and ran. He reached the stairs as the man hurled the jar into the courtyard. Dunk dove forward, seizing Egg and dragging him down. The explosion ripped the air apart, a bloom of emerald fire roaring skyward. The world went white, then black. When Dunk awoke, his ears rang and his mouth tasted of ash. The courtyard was a ruin, the air thick with smoke. Men moved like ghosts among the wreckage. "Egg?" "I'm here," came the boy's voice, hoarse but alive. Dunk pushed himself up. The gate was shattered, half the wall blackened. Of the attackers, only a few corpses remained, and Darren's cell stood empty. Lord Simon's men found tracks leading west by morning. 12 riders, 2 wagons. "They've taken more wildfire," Dunk said grimly. Simon looked at him. "Can you follow?" "I can." "Then take my best horses. Bring them back if you can, and if you can't, I'll stop them," Dunk said. By midday, he and Egg were riding again, following the trail through the charred woods. The land smelled of smoke once more. Above them, the sky was gray and restless. Egg glanced at him. "We can't stop all the dragons, can we, sir?" Dunk's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but we can stop one." The wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of brimstone ahead. Dunk spurred thunder onward. "Hold fast, lad. The fire's not done with us yet." They rode into the deepening west, where the land rolled toward mist and rumor, and the road ahead shimmered faintly with the green reflection of the dying sun, as if the wildfire itself waited there, patient and hungry. The sky was bruised with cloud when they rode westward from River Run, following the broken trail of the fleeing Blackfire men. The storm that had hung over the Trident for days seemed to drift with them, its wind sharp and cold, its light dim and colorless. The world smelled of rain and smoke and horses' sweat. Dunk rode at the front, his cloak flapping like a torn banner, eyes scanning the road. Egg followed close behind, his hood drawn up against the wind. They had been riding for 2 days without rest, sleeping little, eating less. The tracks they followed were easy to read. 12 riders, 2 wagons laden heavy, their wheels cutting deep into the soft earth. The fire they carried might be sleeping now, sealed in clay and straw, but Dunk knew how quickly it could wake. At a rise above the road, he reined Thunder to a halt. Far below, a flicker of firelight marked a camp in the trees. The wagon stood beside a ruined sept, its stone walls half collapsed. The Blackfire men had stopped to rest. "Stay here," Dunk told Egg. "If I don't come back, ride for River Run. Tell Lord Simon what you saw." "I'm not leaving you," Egg said, chin set. "This isn't a song, lad," Dunk said. "It's death waiting on the wind." Egg's voice was small but fierce. "Then I'll face it with you." Dunk gave a low growl that might have been a laugh. 7 saved me from stubborn squires." He dismounted and crept through the trees. Rain began to fall, thin and cold. He counted 9 men around the fire, the others likely on watch. One of the wagons stood uncovered, its tarp pulled aside. Beneath it, Dunk saw the glint of green light. A familiar voice drifted through the rain. "You should have left me in chains, Hedge Knight." Dunk froze. Sir Darren stood beside the fire, his pale hair plastered to his head by rain, his face pale as bone. He was speaking to a smaller man, the one who seemed to lead the company now. "The wildfire's near ready," the man said. "We'll have it across the river by morning. The rest of our brothers wait in the Stormlands." Darren's smile was thin as a knife. "Then the storm will come soon. The Black Dragon will rise again, and the world will remember our fire." Dunk's hand went to his sword. He could wait for dawn, Gather men, return. But there would be no time. Once that fire crossed the river, half the reach could burn. He had one chance. He stepped into the light, blade drawn. It's over. For a heartbeat, none moved. Then chaos erupted. Darren shouted, men scrambled for weapons, and Dunk charged. His first stroke took one man across the chest. His second shattered a spear haft. Rain hissed on steel. Egg burst from the trees behind him, swinging a fallen branch like a mace. "Sir!" he cried. "Stay back!" Dunk shouted, but the boy was already in the thick of it, darting beneath a rider's blade. Darren drew his own sword, the black steel gleaming with a faint green sheen. "You should have killed me when you could, sir," he said. "Now, the fire burns in my blood." Their blades met with a crash that shook the rain from the trees. Darren fought like a man possessed, each strike swift and sure, his eyes alight with madness. Dunk felt the strength of him, smaller, faster, but rage and zeal made him fierce. "Your fire dies tonight," Dunk growled. "Fire never dies," Darren hissed, parrying a blow and slashing low. "It only waits to be born anew." Their swords locked. Dunk pushed, driving the smaller man backward toward the wagons. A jar rolled loose beneath their feet. It struck a stone, cracked, and began to hiss. "Seven hells," Dunk breathed. Green flame burst upward, hungry and bright, throwing both men back. Darren's cloak caught fire. He screamed, rolling in the mud. The fire clung to him like a living thing, devouring cloak and flesh alike. Dunk turned, coughing, eyes streaming. The wagon had caught, the jars inside glowing through their straw wrappings. "Egg!" he roared. "Get clear!" The boy was already dragging one of the horses loose, kicking mud over the nearest flames. Dunk seized the reins and heaved, pulling the burning wagon toward the riverbank. The wood groaned and split, but he did not stop. The fire grew hotter, its light blinding. He reached the edge and shoved with all his strength. The wagon lurched, tilted, and toppled into the river below. The explosion came an instant later, a blinding flash of green that swallowed sound and sight. When the world returned, Dunk was lying in the mud, his ears ringing, his armor scorched. Rain fell in heavy sheets, hissing as it met the cooling ground. Beside him, Egg stirred, coughing. "Sir," the boy gasped. "The fire!" "It's out," Dunk said hoarsely. He looked toward the river. The water boiled where the wagon had fallen, green light flickering and fading. On the bank lay what remained of Darren Blackfire, the fire's work done. Of the others, a few still lived, crawling away through the mud, their banners trampled and their dreams of dragons drowned. Dunk rose unsteadily, leaning on his sword. "Gather the horses," he said. "We'll take the prisoners to River Run." Egg stared at him through the rain. "You could have died." "I?" Dunk said. "But I didn't, and neither did you." He placed a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "That'll have to be enough." They rode through the storm until dawn, the road a ribbon of mud and ruin. When at last they reached the ferry, Dunk turned to look back. The river ran calm again, carrying the last traces of green away to the sea. At River Run, Lord Simon received them with weary gratitude. "You've done more than most lords would dare, Sir Duncan," he said. "The Blackfire fire's quenched. For now." "For now," Dunk echoed. "But fire leaves embers. Someone will stir them again." Lord Simon nodded grimly. "Then may the Seven send you to stamp them out." That night, when all was quiet, Dunk and Egg stood upon the battlements. The storm had passed. Stars shone above the river, clear and cold. Egg spoke first. Will they ever stop, sir? The black fires, the wars, the burning? Dunk gazed at the horizon, where the water caught the moonlight like molten silver. No, lad. Men don't stop wanting crowns. So long as there are dragons in their dreams, there'll be nights to wake and fight them. Egg nodded slowly. Then we'll keep riding. Aye, Dunk said softly. We'll ride. Below, the river whispered, carrying away ash, secrets, and the memory of green flame. The night was peaceful at last, but far to the east, lightning flared behind the clouds, silent and distant, like the echo of a dragon's roar. And though Dunk did not turn to see it, he felt it all the same, a tremor in the air, a reminder that peace, like fire, was only ever borrowed. So they stood beneath the stars, a knight and a squire, the last defenders of a realm too proud to learn. And when the wind rose, it carried not smoke, but the promise of the road ahead, endless, uncertain,